The first time my sister told someone I was cruel. She was 14. Furious. And standing in a kitchen I had paid for with overtime. The first time she told people I abused her. She was 23. Polished. Crying on command. And seated at a Thanksgiving table surrounded by relatives who had not lifted a finger when we were children. The last time she said it, she was looking at proof she had forgotten existed. And nobody at that table touched their food after that. Let me take you back. If this story resonates with you, like and subscribe, but only if it feels true to something you have survived. I was 19 when our mother left for the last time. Not stormed out, not after some spectacular fight. She just disappeared with a man named Leon, who sold used boats and wore too much cologne. She left a note on the microwave under a chipped magnet shaped like Florida. The note said, "I need to choose myself for once." That was all. No apology. No explanation. No promise to come back. Just a sentence people use when they want to make selfishness sound like healing. Our father had already been gone for almost a year by then. He left in quieter stages. First the late nights, then the weekends, then the missing rent money, then the girlfriend no one was supposed to know about. Then one day, he moved 3 counties away and started calling every other Sunday like frequency counted as parenting. That left me and my sister, Wren, in a 2-bedroom rental outside Dayton, Ohio, with peeling linoleum, a dying water heater, and a mailbox full of overdue notices. Wren was 10. I was 19. I had just finished my first year at community college and was supposed to start a nursing transfer track the next fall. Instead, I stood in our kitchen with our mother's note in my hand, a pack of hot dogs in the fridge, $38 in my checking account, and a child upstairs who still believed adults usually came back. I remember the smell of that kitchen, coffee grounds in the trash, dish soap, something sour from the old sponge by the sink. I remember the hum of the refrigerator and the strange stillness in the house. Like the walls themselves were listening to see what I would do. I did the only thing I could do. I kept going. I got legal guardianship 6 months later with help from a church legal clinic and a retired family court secretary who took one look at our paperwork and said, "Honey, if you wait for those 2 to do the right thing, that child will be grown." She was right. I worked mornings at a diner, afternoons at a pharmacy checkout, nights studying when I could. I learned how to compare utility rates, stretch spaghetti into 3 meals, and smile at school administrators who spoke to me like I was a confused teenage babysitter instead of the person keeping my sister fed. Everything in those years was numbers. Rent due on the 3rd. Electric due on the 9th. Wren's asthma refill every 26 days. Field trip fee by Friday. Gas tank nearly empty. Milk, good for 2 more breakfasts. My own sleep down to 4 hours if nothing went wrong. Something always went wrong. But Wren was bright. Funny. Beautiful in that careless little girl way with missing shoelaces and grass stains on her knees. She loved sketching birds in the margins of homework. She hated math. She cried when dogs got hurt in movies. At night, if thunder shook the windows, she would come stand in my doorway and ask, "Can I just stay until it stops?" And I would say yes, even when I had an exam in the morning. Because some forms of exhaustion are still love. People like to romanticize sacrifice after the hard part is over. They turn it into a clean story. Big sister steps up. Little sister survives. Years later, everyone understands. That is not how it happened. There was no music swelling in the background. No neighbors bringing casseroles every week. No secret scholarship dropping out of the sky because life had finally decided to be fair. There was just me, trying to become a wall before the weather got to her. And I was not always gentle. That is the part people do not like to hear. I was 20, 21, 22. Still half a child myself. I was frightened all the time. I snapped when bills piled up. I hated seeing food wasted. I counted dollars out loud at the grocery store. I said no to sleepovers because I did not know the parents. I said no to summer camp because I could not afford the fee. I said no to trendy shoes, class rings, dance lessons, school trips, and every other ordinary thing that felt impossible when your life was held together by coupons and timing. Wren took each no like an indictment. To her, I was not the reason the world had become narrow. I was the face attached to the narrowness. That happens in families like ours. The person who stays gets blamed for the people who left. When she was 12, she told her friend at school that I ran the house like prison. The school counselor called me in. I sat in one of those tiny chairs under a bulletin board covered in anti-bullying posters while a woman with sympathetic eyes asked if there was too much structure in the home. Structure. That was the word she used after I explained curfews. Homework. Choris. And the fact that I needed Wren to call if she walked anywhere after school because I was the only adult legally responsible for her. I smiled the whole meeting. Then I sat in my car afterward and cried so hard my chest hurt. Not because the counselor had been cruel, because I realized how easy it would be for people to misunderstand survival when they had never had to ration it. Still, most days Wren loved me, or at least needed me enough that love and need looked the same. She made me birthday cards with crooked hearts. She waited up when I worked late. If I had enough money for one fast food meal after a rough week, she always gave me the fries she thought were the best ones. Some nights she would sit at the kitchen counter while I studied anatomy flashcards and ask me to read the hard words out loud because she liked the sound of them. Clavicle, sternum, ventricle. She would repeat them like secrets. Those were the moments that kept me from breaking. Not because they made it easy, because they made it worth continuing. By the time I was 24, I had become a licensed practical nurse. Not the full nursing path I had originally planned. Life had cut that road shorter. But it was something stable. Something real. I took a position at a long-term care facility in Kettering and finally moved us out of the rental house into a modest duplex with decent plumbing and windows that did not rattle in the winter. Wren was 15 then. Beautiful in a sharper way now. All elbows and opinions. She wanted better clothes. Better friends. A better story than the one she had. And more than anything, she wanted our past to feel like someone else's embarrassment. That was when the resentment deepened. Not because I changed, because our life became less obviously dire. And once immediate crisis fades, old deprivation starts looking personal. She asked questions then that children should be allowed to ask, but caregivers often dread hearing. Why didn't you make Mom stay? Why didn't you tell me Dad had another family before I found out online? Why did you make me switch schools when I was 13? Why did I never get to do normal things? Each answer I gave sounded smaller than the question. Because truth often does. I would say, I couldn't make her stay. Or, I was trying to protect you. Or, we had to move where I could afford the rent. All true. None satisfying. One Friday evening when she was 16, I came home from a double shift and found 3 girls in our living room. Music playing. Pizza boxes open. And Wren wearing a dress I had never seen before. I stood in the doorway, still smelling like antiseptic and coffee, and asked the obvious question. What is this? Wren rolled her eyes. It's just people. It was not just people. It was a full unauthorized party in a house I was paying for with overtime. I told the girls to call their rides. Wren exploded. Not sulking. Not teenage irritation. Rage. You ruin everything. The room went silent. One of the girls grabbed her purse immediately. I said, "Go to your room." She laughed in my face. A hard, sharp sound I had never heard from her before. You are not my mother. No. I said, I'm the person keeping the lights on. That was the wrong sentence. True, but wrong. I knew it the second I said it. She stared at me like I had slapped her. Then she shouted, "Maybe I wish you weren't here either." The girls left in a blur of perfume and panic. The front door slammed. And then it was just the 2 of us. Standing in that small living room with the TV still glowing and paper plates on the coffee table, like evidence of how little control I really had. Wren started crying first. Not soft crying. Humiliated crying. The kind that makes people say cruel things because pain wants company. She said I wanted her miserable. She said I liked controlling everything. She said I made her feel like a burden. That one hit hardest because I had spent years trying to make sure she never felt it. Even when I was carrying it every day. I did not yell back. That is what matters. I did not scream. I did not touch her. I told her to go upstairs and cool off. Then I cleaned the living room alone. I folded blankets. Threw out pizza crusts. Wiped soda rings from the coffee table. And for the first time, I thought something I hated myself for thinking. What if love is not enough to make someone remember what you gave up? The answer, as it turned out, was no. It is not. At 17, Wren fell in with a different crowd. Older boys. Girls who talked like meanness was maturity. Kids with expensive sneakers and no curfew. One of them, a girl named Shelby, liked telling people she was basically grown because her mother let her drink at home. Shelby hated me immediately. Authority bothers certain people on site. I banned Wren from spending nights at Shelby's house after hearing there were 20-year-old men hanging around in the garage. Wren responded by telling anyone who would listen that I was psychotic. She started keeping a running list of my rules on her phone like evidence. Curfew. Text me when you get there. No locked bedroom doors when boys are over. No vaping in my house. Home by midnight. For years afterward, she would refer to that list like it was a war archive. Once, during a screaming match in the kitchen, she shoved the phone in my face and said, "Do you see this? Do you see how insane this is?" I looked at the screen. It was a list of things any exhausted parent in America would probably call basic, but I was not a parent. Not really. I was a sister trying to perform authority on a body that still remembered what it felt like to be 19 and terrified in a bad apartment. That tension broke something between us. Not all at once. In layers. By the time Wren turned 18, she wanted out. Not from poverty anymore. From me. She got into a small college 2 hours away, with partial aid, and acted like the acceptance letter was an emancipation document. I helped her pack. Bought plastic storage bins on sale. Labeled everything in black marker. Sheets, towels, winter clothes, desk items. At one point, she stood in her half-empty room holding an old framed photo of us at the county fair and said, "You don't have to act so emotional. It's just college." I had not realized my face was showing anything. I said, "I know what college is." She gave me a look. We both knew I meant I knew what I had not gotten to have. I drove her there in August heat with the windows halfway down because the air conditioning was failing again. Her dorm smelled like dust, fresh paint, and industrial cleaner. The room was tiny. Cinder block walls. 2 twin beds. A window facing the parking lot. She seemed thrilled. She arranged her makeup before her textbooks. She kept checking her phone for messages from people who were already inviting her somewhere. When I hugged her goodbye, she went stiff for a second before relaxing just enough to be polite. "Thanks," she said. It sounded like she was speaking to a cashier. The drive home was one of the loneliest drives of my life. Not because I missed her already. Because I realized I did not know whether we had survived or simply ended. Before I tell you what happened next, comment same if this sounds like your story. Because sometimes the person you saved grows up hating the shape of the rescue. For the first month, college seemed to improve her. She called twice a week. Told me about a literature professor she loved. Asked for my chili recipe. Complained about a girl on her floor who stole everyone's almond milk. I let myself hope. That was my mistake. By October, the calls became requests. Money for books. Money for a class fee. Money because her work-study paycheck was delayed. Some of it was legitimate. Some of it probably was not. I sent what I could anyway. Then one Sunday afternoon, I got a call from campus security. Not an emergency, just a concern. They asked whether Wren had a history of family conflict at home. My whole body went cold. I said, carefully, "What kind of concern?" The officer on the line hesitated. She mentioned feeling unsafe growing up. The room around me blurred. I was standing at my own kitchen counter cutting celery for soup when he said it. I remember the pale green pieces scattered under my hand. The knife handle slick in my palm. The smell of onions still in the air. Unsafe. That was the word. I asked if she was in danger now. He said no. I asked if there had been an incident. He said he could not disclose details, but wanted context because she appeared emotionally activated. Emotionally activated. Another phrase people use when they want to make chaos sound clinical. I answered carefully. I said our parents abandoned us. I said I had legal guardianship. I said there had been conflict as she got older. Yes. But no violence. No abuse. No police. No hospital visits. Nothing like that. The officer thanked me and hung up. I stood in my kitchen for almost 10 minutes without moving. Then Wren called that night as if nothing had happened. I wanted to demand an explanation. I wanted to ask what exactly she had told people. Instead, I said, "How are classes?" That is the thing about loving someone unstable in your own history. You are always deciding whether truth will repair the moment or detonate it. By Thanksgiving break, I knew something was wrong. She texted less. Her replies were clipped. When I asked if she was coming home Wednesday or Thursday, she said maybe neither because home is complicated. I stared at that message until the words stopped looking like English. Home is complicated. As if the complication had not once worn my shoes to the bone trying to build it. She did come on Thursday morning, but she arrived different. More styled. More distant. There was a carefulness in her face I had only seen before when she was rehearsing some version of herself for strangers. She brought 2 duffel bags. A new coat I knew she had not bought with bookstore wages. And a bitterness that entered the house before she did. "Hey," I said. She nodded. "Hey." That was it. No hug. No smile. No thanks for the ride I had offered, and she had refused because a friend had better timing. I told myself not to react. People change at college. Sometimes they return inflated with borrowed language and half-formed identities. Sometimes they need a few days to settle. That is what I told myself while I made mashed potatoes. That is what I told myself while she sat at my kitchen island scrolling through her phone. That is what I told myself until my Aunt Denise came by that evening and hugged Wren for too long. Then looked at me with a strange expression I could not place. Pity. Maybe. Suspicion. Something close to both. At dinner, Denise kept asking Wren whether campus counseling had been helping. I looked up. Wren answered without looking at me. "It's been useful." Denise squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you finally have support." Finally. That word snapped into place in my head like a lock. I said nothing at the table. Not because I was calm. Because I was suddenly afraid of what would happen if I asked the wrong question in front of the wrong person. Later that night, after Denise left and Wren went upstairs, I washed dishes with trembling hands. The water ran too hot over my skin. Outside, wind moved the bare branches against the side of the house with a dry, scraping sound. I was drying the last plate when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Denise. "You should give her some space. She's healing from more than you know." I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Then I sat down at the kitchen table because my knees no longer felt dependable. Healing from more than you know. That was the moment I understood there was a story moving through the family. And I was the villain in it. I did not sleep much that night. Attoi, 14 a.m. I got up, made tea. I barely drank, and sat in the dark living room with only the microwave clock lit in blue. My mind kept circling the same questions. What had Wren said? How much did Denise know? Who else knew? How long had this been spreading? And beneath all of that, the ugliest question of all. Had I done something that looked unforgivable from the outside without realizing how it had landed on her? That is what false accusation steals first. Not your reputation. Your certainty. It makes you review your own memory like an unreliable witness. I thought about the time I took her bedroom door off the hinges for one weekend, after she kept sneaking boys in through the window. I thought about every shouting match, every grounded summer, every confiscated phone. Every time I blocked the front door and told her she was not leaving, dressed like that with drunk seniors waiting outside. I thought about the night she screamed that I ruined her life and I yelled back. I saved it. God. I hated that memory. Not because it was false, because it was too raw to sound loving. By morning I was hollowed out. Wren came downstairs around 10 wearing leggings. My old university sweatshirt she had once mocked. And the detached expression of someone already half committed to a performance. I made coffee. She poured orange juice. For a while, we stood in that kitchen with all our shared history hanging between us like wet laundry. Then I said the only thing I could say. What have you been telling people? She froze. Just for a second. Then she turned slowly and said, What do you mean? There are moments when a lie announces itself before the words arrive. This was one of them. I set my mug down carefully. I mean, Denise texted me last night telling me you were healing from something. Campus security called me last month, asking if you were safe growing up. So I am asking you directly, what have you been telling people? Her face changed. Not guilty. Defensive. Young enough still to confuse defense with truth. She crossed her arms. You wouldn't understand. Try me. She laughed once, without humor. See? That tone. What tone? The one where you act like you're in charge of reality. I stared at her. I am asking a question. No, she said. You're interrogating me like always. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Wren? She looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed years older and much less honest. I told people what it was like growing up with you. My mouth went dry. And what exactly was that? She lifted one shoulder. Controlling, scary, unpredictable. Those 3 words hit the room like broken glass. Controlling, scary, unpredictable. Each one close enough to ordinary conflict to sound believable. That is how dangerous accusations begin. Not always with outrageous lies. With strategic framing. I said, very carefully, did you tell people I abused you? She looked away. Silence. Then, softly, I told them you hurt me. That sentence sat there between us. Monstrous in its flexibility. Who hurt me? Emotionally? Physically? Psychologically? Intentionally? Negligently? She knew what she was doing. Whether she admitted it or not. I took one step back, as if the floor itself had become unstable. Do you understand what people hear when you say that? Her chin lifted. Maybe they hear the truth. I felt something icy move through me then. Not rage. Not yet. Clarity. The dangerous kind. I said, Did I ever hit you? She said nothing. Did I ever put my hands on you in anger? Nothing. Did I ever leave bruises, call you names, lock you in rooms, starve you, threaten you? Her voice came out small but stubborn. You don't have to hit someone to damage them. That was true. Pain is not only physical, but truth can still be used as a disguise. I nodded slowly. No, you don't. She took that as permission to keep going. You made me feel watched all the time, judged, controlled. I couldn't breathe in this house. This house, I said, is the reason you had somewhere to sleep? The second the words left my mouth, I hated them. Because gratitude cannot be demanded without becoming its own violence. Wren's eyes filled instantly. There, she said. That? You always do that. You always throw what you did for me in my face. I closed my eyes briefly. Not because she was right. Because she was partly right, in a way that made the whole thing harder. When I opened them, I said, quieter. I am asking you to stop telling people I abused you. She looked away again, then said the sentence that changed everything. Maybe if the story sounds that bad. That says something. That was not confusion. That was intention. I understood it all at once then. She wanted the emotional truth of her resentment to matter more than the factual truth of what had happened. And she was willing to let other people fill in the blanks with their darkest assumptions if it bought her sympathy. That is the cruel genius of some lies. The liar does not always have to say the worst part. They only have to invite it. I stepped back from the counter. The house felt too small. The air too thin. I said, "We are not doing this while you hide behind implication." She laughed bitterly. Why? Because you can't control the narrative? Narrative. Another borrowed college word. I almost smiled at the ugliness of it. No, I said, because this is my life too. She grabbed her phone off the counter. I knew you'd react like this. React like what? Like I owe you silence. My voice stayed calm. But it took effort. You do not owe me silence. You owe me honesty. She looked at me as if those were the same thing, and she resented both. Then she walked out of the kitchen. A minute later, I heard the guest room door slam hard enough to shake the picture frames in the hallway. I stood there alone. The coffee had gone cold. The sink still held the breakfast dishes. The November light through the window was pale and weak, making the whole kitchen look older than it was. I put both hands on the counter and bowed my head. Then I did something I had not done in years. I called our mother. She did not answer. Of course she did not. I left no voicemail. Around 4 that afternoon, my cousin Marissa texted me. Just checking in. Hope tomorrow goes okay. Tomorrow. Thanksgiving. That was when I realized this story was bigger than Denise. Bigger than one counseling office. Wren had been talking. The family had been listening. And I was about to sit at a holiday table where at least some of the people present already believed I had destroyed the child I raised. Type truth if you've seen this in your family. And tell me where you're watching from. Because betrayal always travels faster through relatives than facts do. I spent the evening brining turkey in silence. Rosemary. Salt. Garlic. Cold water turning my hands numb in the sink. I had hosted Thanksgiving for 6 years because no one else wanted the work, and I was foolish enough to mistake usefulness for belonging. Every year I cooked. Every year they arrived late. Loud. And underhelpful. Every year, someone complimented the pie and ignored the labor. This year felt different. The house was too quiet upstairs. The family group text was too active. And every time my phone lit up with some bland holiday message, I could feel judgment moving beneath the surface, like something alive under ice. By 10 that night, I had cleaned the counters twice, set out serving bowls, polished water glasses that nobody ever noticed. Then I opened the hallway closet looking for extra napkins, and a plastic storage tote slid down from the top shelf. It hit the floor hard enough that the lid cracked sideways. Papers spilled out. Old school folders. Medical receipts. Guardianship documents. A dead digital camcorder I had not seen in years. I crouched on the floor and started gathering things automatically. And that was when I saw it. A slim black voice recorder. Cheap. Scratched. Battery cover taped once with clear office tape. I stared at it for a long time before memory came back. Not all at once. In fragments. The summer Wren was 16. The social worker from Juvenile Outreach who had suggested I record our high-conflict interactions after Wren ran away for one night and told police I was emotionally unstable. I had bought the recorder because the social worker said documentation protects everyone. I used it twice. Maybe 3 times. Then life moved on and the recorder ended up in storage with old paperwork and things I was too tired to organize. My pulse started beating harder. I sat back on my heels on the hallway floor. The recorder in one hand, a stack of yellowed bills in the other. Could anything still be on it? Could it even turn on? I found 2 AAA batteries in the junk drawer and stood there in my kitchen under the overhead light, trying not to hope. Because hope is dangerous when the ground has already started giving way. The recorder clicked once, then lit up. A dim little screen. Still alive. I stared at the menu. 3 files. All dated 7 years earlier. My whole body went still. Upstairs. I could hear Wren moving around in the guest room. A drawer opening. Footsteps. Water running briefly in the bathroom. Ordinary sounds. And down in my hand. Maybe. A version of the past she had forgotten existed. I did not press play. Not yet. I just stood there in the kitchen holding the recorder while the refrigerator hummed, and the turkey brined and the house held its breath with me. I did not press play right away. That is important. People always imagine truth arriving with instant courage. It usually doesn't. Usually, it arrives in your hand while your stomach drops and your mind starts bargaining with reality. Maybe the files are blank. Maybe they are corrupted. Maybe I remembered wrong. Maybe none of it will matter. I stood in that kitchen for almost a full minute, staring at the tiny screen while the sink dripped behind me, and the old wall clock above the pantry ticked louder than it ever had before. 3 files. 7 years old. 3 chances. Or 3 ways to be disappointed all over again. I finally took the recorder to the table and sat down under the hanging light. The turkey was still in the sink. The side dishes were half prepped. My phone kept lighting up with family messages I did not open. I pressed play on the first file. At first there was static, then a scrape, then my own voice, younger and tighter than I remembered. Wren, sit down. I'm not chasing you around the house. My whole body went cold. It was real. Not memory. Not my version. Sound. A door slamming. Wren shouting from somewhere farther away. You took my phone again. My voice answered. Exhausted. Yes. Because you lied about where you were. Then another voice. Amalewan. Young. Nervous. One of the boys she had brought over that summer. He said, I should go. I heard myself say, yes, you should. Then Wren again. You embarrass me on purpose. And the line I remembered hating even before she weaponized our history against me. I am trying to keep you safe. That first recording ended there. Not enough. Not even close. It proved conflict. Rules. Tension. Nothing more. Nothing that would puncture a lie already dressed in emotional language. I swallowed hard and moved to the second file. This one opened with wind noise and the clink of keys. Then my car door closing. Then Wren crying. Not polished crying. Teenage rage crying. We were in my car. I remembered the night slowly. She had run out after a fight and I had found her 2 streets over near the park entrance. The recording caught me saying, very carefully, "Get in the car. We are not doing this in the street." She shouted, "You can't control everything." Then I said the words that made my chest tighten even now. "I am not trying to control everything. I am trying to keep you alive until you're old enough to hate me safely." Silence followed that. A long silence. Then Wren said, in a smaller voice, "You always say stuff like that to make me feel guilty." I gripped the recorder harder. Because that was the whole pattern in one sentence. Love offered under pressure. Care received as control. Sacrifice translated into manipulation because admitting dependence was too humiliating for her. The second file ended with the sound of my blinker clicking and Wren crying more softly than before. Still not enough. Then I opened the third file. I knew within 10 seconds that this was the one. The room around me vanished. The file started in our old duplex kitchen. I could hear the refrigerator hum from that place. The squeak in the cabinet door. The sharp metallic click of the cheap faucet handle. Then my voice. Low. Controlled. "Hand me the bottle." Wren's voice came back raw with panic. "No." Then mine again. "Wren, I am asking one time. Hand me the vodka." There was a pause. Then the distinct sound of glass hitting laminate. A bottle set down hard. I had forgotten that night. Or maybe not forgotten. Buried. She had been 16. Shelby had dropped her off half-conscious. There had been boys in the car. One of them older. Too old. Wren had stumbled into the kitchen, smelling like liquor and sweet perfume and cold air. Mascara smeared. Knees scraped. Laughing and crying in the same breath. I had taken the bottle from her bag and started recording because the social worker had told me. If she ever comes home intoxicated or makes threats, document the interaction. I sat at the kitchen table now. Years later, listening to a younger version of myself trying desperately not to lose control. On the file, Wren shouted, "You don't get to search my stuff." I said, "When you are drunk at 16 and can barely stand." "Yes, I do." Then she screamed the line that made my skin go cold. "I should just tell people you hit me." The room disappeared around me. My hand covered my mouth. I listened again. I had to. I backed it up and replayed it. Clearer the second time because now I was waiting for it. "I should just tell people you hit me." Then my own voice. Stunned. "What?" And Wren again, slurring through anger. "You act like you own me? Maybe I'll tell them you're abusive. Maybe then you'll stop." I stopped breathing. There it was. Not implied. Not reframed. Said outright. 7 years old. Recorded before college. Before therapy language. before relatives and counselors and carefully edited versions of our life. The file kept going. I could hear myself say, voice shaking now, Wren, do you understand what you're saying? She laughed. God, that laugh. I know exactly what I'm saying. Then the sound of a chair scraping. Me moving closer, maybe. Not touching. Just trying to hold the room together. I said, you are drunk. Go upstairs. And she said, in the flat, cruel way only teenagers and very practiced adults can manage. You care more about looking good than about me. That line sat inside me like a blade, because it was the accusation underneath everything. Not that I had been perfect, that I had been false, that everything I had done had somehow been about control or image or obligation, instead of the simple, brutal truth that I had loved her more fiercely than my own future. I listened to the file all the way through. Then once more from the beginning. Then I set the recorder down and stared at the table. My tea was still sitting there from the night before, untouched and gone cold. The overhead light made the wood grain look harsher than usual. Outside, the wind moved something metal in the yard with a faint ringing sound. Upstairs, Wren was still awake. I could hear her footsteps from time to time. And suddenly the whole shape of the next day changed. Not because I felt victorious, because I felt steady. There is a kind of terror that comes from being falsely accused. But there is another kind that comes when you realize you may finally be able to stop doubting your own memory. That second one is quieter, colder, more useful. I copied the files to my laptop immediately, then to a cloud folder. Then I recorded a short video on my phone, showing the recorder screen, the file dates, and me opening each file. Chain of proof. I was done being naive. By midnight, I had not cried. That surprised me. I had thought, if evidence ever came, I would collapse with relief. Instead, I became calm in a way that almost frightened me. Because relief is soft. This was sharper. This was the end of confusion. The next morning, Thanksgiving arrived bright and brutally ordinary. Sunlight through the kitchen window. Turkey in the oven. Butter softening on the counter. Coffee too strong because I forgot I had already added grounds once. Wren came downstairs around 9 wearing jeans, a fitted sweater, and the expression of someone preparing to be observed. She looked rested, composed, beautiful, even. That was the hard part. Lies often arrive dressed in something sympathetic. She glanced at the turkey. You started early. I always do. She opened the fridge, took out creamer, and asked, what time is everyone coming? As planned, 1. She nodded. No mention of yesterday. No apology. No retraction. Nothing. I watched her move through my kitchen and wondered how many times she had practiced this new version of herself for other people. How many times she had lowered her voice, let her eyes fill, and told the story in a way that made ordinary hardship sound like targeted cruelty. I wanted to confront her again, to tell her I knew, to watch her face when the ground vanished under the lie. But I did not. Not yet. Because a truth like that needed witnesses. That sounds cruel until you understand what false accusations do in families. If they spread in whispers, then correction cannot happen in private softness. Not when the damage was communal. Not when the shame had already been distributed. By 11:30, the house smelled like sage, butter, roasted skin, and cinnamon from the pies cooling by the window. I set the table with the good dishes I use twice a year. Polished serving spoons, water glasses, the heavy cream-colored napkins I kept for holidays. The same ritual as always. Only this time, underneath it, there was voltage. Wren helped arrange the rolls in a basket. I noticed her hands were steady. Mine were too. At 12:58, the first knock came. Aunt Denise and Uncle Greg. Denise hugged me with that careful, overcompensating pressure people use when they think they are being kind to someone dangerous. Then she hugged Wren longer. Much longer. Greg shook my hand. Would not quite meet my eyes. After them came Marissa with her husband and toddler. Then my cousin Leah. Then, 15 minutes late as always, our mother. Yes, our mother showed up. That was the real twist I had not expected. She swept in wearing a camel coat, gold hoops, expensive boots, and a smell of vanilla and airport perfume. Older, thinner, still beautiful in the infuriating way that made people forgive her before she finished speaking. She held out her arms the second she saw Wren. Oh, baby. Wren burst into tears instantly. Of course she did. Our mother looked over Wren's shoulder at me with an expression full of carefully staged sorrow. No apology. No accountability. Just the face of a woman who knew she could walk back into a wreckage and still be mistaken for comfort. If I live to be 100, I will never understand that kind of confidence, she said. Claire. Just my name. As if that covered 14 years. I nodded once. Mom. That is all I gave her. We moved into the meal in stages. Drinks. Appetizers. People hovering around the kitchen island pretending not to clock every undercurrent in the room. I could feel it already. Something had been primed. Certain glances lingered too long on me. Certain tones with Wren were too protective, too gentle, too informed. At one point, Denise touched Wren's elbow and said, "If it gets overwhelming, we can leave." In my own house, with my own groceries in the oven, I just smiled and said, "Dinner will be ready in 10. Wren kept close to our mother, which somehow would have wounded me more if I had not already moved past wanting fairness from either of them. That is the thing about repeated betrayal. Eventually, pain burns down to clarity. When we all sat down, there were 11 people at the table. Turkey in the center. Gravy boat near Denise. Sweet potatoes by Leah. Green beans no one ever really wanted, but everyone insisted made the meal complete. I took my usual seat at one end because I was serving. Wren sat halfway down on the right. Our mother beside her. Denise across from them. Greg at the far corner. Conversation started politely. Food first. Then weather. Then traffic. Then somebody asked Wren how classes were going. That was the opening. I knew it the moment it happened. Wren lowered her eyes. Gave a small, tight smile. Better now. Denise reached for her hand under the table edge. Not subtle enough. That's what matters. Our mother sighed softly. the kind of sigh meant to invite questions. Marissa glanced at me quickly, then back at her plate. I set down the carving knife. Quietly. No clatter. No dramatic gesture. Just set it down. Then I asked, "Better now than when?" The whole table shifted. Wren looked up. Our mother's hand stilled on her wineglass. Denise said, "Claire, maybe today." "No." I said, still calm, "Today is fine." That made everyone look at me. Not because I raised my voice, because I did not. Wren straightened in her chair. "I don't want to do this." I looked at her. "You should have thought of that before telling people I abused you." There it was. No one moved. The words sat on the table with the turkey and the cranberry sauce and the polished silver, obscene in their clarity. Denise inhaled sharply. Greg stared at his plate. Our mother went pale, then offended, which was almost impressive given her limited investment in the original material. Wren's eyes filled immediately. "You're twisting what I said." I nodded once. "Then untwist it. Right now." Silence. Real silence. The kind where you can hear fabric shift when somebody breathes wrong. Our mother finally found her voice. "Claire, this is not appropriate." I turned to her. "Nothing about you being here is appropriate either. But life keeps surprising us." That shut her up. Denise looked appalled. Greg looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Wren's face had changed. I saw it then. Not just fear. Calculation. She was trying to decide which version of herself would work best in front of the room. Fragile victime. Wronged daughter. Misunderstood truth-teller. She settled on trembling honesty. "I never said you hit me." A technical defense? Exactly what I expected. I leaned back slightly. "No, you just told people I was controlling. Scary. Unpredictable. That you weren't safe growing up. That I hurt you. And then let them connect the dots you wanted." Tears spilled down her face. I was talking about how it felt. "There's a difference," I said, "between saying someone hurt your feelings and implying they were your abuser." Denise jumped in. "She has a right to describe her childhood." I looked at her. "She does. She does not have the right to rewrite mine." That landed harder than I think anyone expected. Because that was the truth under everything. Wren had not just told a flattering lie about herself. She had taken the hardest years of my life and repainted me as the danger inside them. My mother, who had somehow found enough nerve to sip wine in my dining room, finally said, "Maybe everyone has different memories." I almost laughed. Different memories. From the woman who left a note on a microwave and vanished with a man named Leon. I said, "You don't get to discuss memory. You abandoned the scene." She went silent. "Good." Wren wiped at her face. "You always do this. You make everything sound simple and clear so everyone agrees with you." I held her gaze. "No, I make it specific." Then I stood up. Not fast. Not theatrical. Just enough to break the paralysis around the table. I walked into the kitchen, reached into the drawer where I had placed the voice recorder that morning, and brought it back. When I set it on the table, every eye followed it. Small black plastic. Scratched. Unremarkable. The most powerful thing in the room. Wren's face emptied. Not confusion. Recognition. That told me everything. Denise frowned. What is that? I looked at Wren. Then answered Denise. Documentation. Wren stood halfway up from her chair. You recorded me? The outrage in her voice was almost convincing. I said, a juvenile outreach social worker told me to document our high-conflict interactions after you ran away and started making claims to police. Greg turned toward Wren so fast his chair creaked. What claims? She did not answer. Because she knew now. She had forgotten this existed. I picked up the recorder. My hands were steady. Much steadier than my heartbeat. Then I said the sentence I had needed to say for years. You do not get to imply what happened. We are going to hear what happened. Denise stood. Claire. No. I looked at her. Yes. Because I understood something then that I had not understood in my 20s. People who protect lies in the name of comfort are still protecting lies. And comfort had cost me enough already. I pressed play. At first, static. Then the old kitchen. Then my younger voice. Hand me the bottle. The room froze. Wren whispered. Stop. I did not. The file played on. Her teenage voice slurred and furious. My voice trying to stay calm. Then the line. Clear as a church bell and twice as merciless. I should just tell people you hit me. No one at the table moved. Not one fork. Not one napkin. Not 1 inch. The recording continued. You act like you own me? Maybe I'll tell them you're abusive. Maybe then you'll stop. I stopped the playback there. That was enough. More than enough. The silence that followed was not the kind families share. It was the kind crime scenes have after something undeniable appears under bright light. Denise sat down slowly. Greg looked sick. Marissa covered her mouth. Leah stared openly at Wren, as if seeing her for the first time. Our mother's face had gone blank in that particular way. Selfish people go blank when consequences finally stop being theoretical. Wren was crying now. But differently. Not persuasive tears. Exposed tears. She looked at me with hatred, so pure, it almost looked like grief. You kept that? I nodded. Yes? Why? The question was so revealing, I almost smiled. Why keep proof? Why not leave yourself defenseless? Why not stay soft and available for reinterpretation forever? I said, because someone told me documentation protects everyone. Denise whispered, oh my God. Then she turned to Wren. You told me she traumatized you? Wren's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. She did, she said weakly. She did. I believe she felt hurt. That was the tragedy. But pain and truth are not always married. I looked at her and spoke as gently as I could without betraying myself. You were hurt, I said, by our parents, by instability, by being poor, by me having to be the one who said no all the time. I know that. My throat tightened. But you do not get to turn me into the monster because I was the only one left in the house. That broke something in the room. Not loudly. Permanently. Greg finally spoke. Did she ever hit you? Wren stared at the table. Long silence. Then, almost inaudibly, no. Denise closed her eyes. Leah let out a breath she had clearly been holding for months. Marissa looked at me with something like shame. Our mother said nothing. Of course she said nothing. What could she say? Any sentence she offered would have had to walk over the corpse of her own abandonment first. I set the recorder down again. Then, because truth without context can still harden into the wrong shape, I said the rest. I was not perfect. Everyone looked at me. Wren too. I was too strict sometimes, too tired, too sharp. I said things I regret. I brought fear into the house because I lived in fear all the time. No one interrupted. But I fed you. I kept you in school. I got legal guardianship when both our parents disappeared. I worked double shifts. I stayed. And you knew exactly what you were doing when you let people think I abused you. Wren's face crumpled. I just wanted someone to understand how bad it felt. I know, I said. And you chose the worst possible way to get that? That was the truth. Not theatrical evil. Something sadder. She wanted sympathy large enough to match the ache she carried. An ordinary disappointment had never felt big enough. So she escalated the story until people offered her the tenderness she thought she deserved. But that tenderness had been stolen from my name, and I was done paying for it. Before I tell you what happened next, type karma if they deserve the truth. Because some lies live for years, only because decent people think silence is more mature. Denise looked at me then with wet eyes. I'm sorry, she said. Simple. Immediate. No condition. That mattered more than she knew. Greg nodded once. Soigné. Marissa followed. Then Leah. On bewan. In small broken sentences. The people who had believed the easier story started stepping away from it. Not all the way into understanding. That takes longer. But away from the lie. Our mother was the last one anyone expected to speak. Which is exactly why it was infuriating when she chose that moment to say, "We all failed both of you." I looked at her and felt something close to contempt settle calmly into place. No, I said, you failed both of us. The rest of them just found it convenient. She looked like I had slapped her. Good. Convenience is how most family damage survives. Wren stood abruptly and pushed back her chair. I can't do this. No one stopped her this time. She fled to the hallway. Then the guest room door slammed so hard the glass in the china cabinet trembled. Nobody moved to comfort her. That was new. And deserved. The table stayed frozen for another few seconds. Then Denise, very quietly, said, "How long have you been carrying this?" I looked down at my plate. My appetite was gone. Most of my life, I said. That was when I finally felt tired. Not triumphant. Not vindicated in some clean movie ending way. Just tired in the bones. The kind of tired that comes when the truth has done its work, and now you still have to live in the aftermath. Greg cleared his throat. Do you want us to leave? I looked around at the turkey. The untouched rolls. The sweet potatoes cooling. My whole day scattered by a reckoning I had never wanted to host. Then I said the only thing that felt honest. Yes. No one argued. That was another small mercy. Coats were gathered. Murmured apologies repeated. Dishes left where they sat. Shoes found near the door. The house emptied in under 10 minutes. Our mother hovered longest, as if she believed proximity might count as motherhood after all. At the door she said, "Claire, I know I don't deserve—" "No." I said, "You don't." Then I opened the door wider. And she left. After the last car pulled away, the house became so quiet I could hear the oven fan cooling down. I stood in the entryway with one hand still on the doorknob. Then I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because the body has strange ways of surviving impact. Wren did not come out of the guest room for nearly an hour. I cleaned in silence while I waited. Wrapped leftovers. Covered the turkey. Poured cold gravy down the sink. Stacked plates. The motions helped. Order often does. When she finally emerged, her eyes were swollen and her voice was gone rough. She stood in the kitchen doorway, smaller than I had seen her look in years. Not because I had shamed her, because the story she used to hold herself up had collapsed. She said, "I didn't think you still had that." I put a plate in the dishwasher. "I know." She swallowed. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." I believed that too, which did not make it smaller. It did. I said. She nodded weakly. Then she said, "I hated how trapped I felt here." I looked at her. For the first time all day, neither of us had an audience. Just the two of us. The way it had started. "I know." I said again, "I hated it too." That seemed to confuse her. Because resentment needs a villain more than it wants complexity. She frowned. "You always acted like you were fine." I almost smiled at the absurdity of that. "No." I said, "I acted like I had no choice." Her eyes filled again. Not dramatic this time. Just young. I wanted someone to blame. There it was. Finally. The sentence underneath every accusation. I leaned against the counter. "You had people to blame?" She looked down. I let the silence stretch. Then finished it for her. "It just wasn't me." She started crying in earnest then. Shoulders shaking. No performance left in it. I did not go to her immediately. That may sound cold. It wasn't. It was boundary. There is a difference between compassion and rushing in to clean up the mess someone made from your name. After a minute, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I believed she meant it. I also knew sorry was nowhere near enough. "I hear you." I said. That was all. She looked up. Maybe expecting more? Forgiveness. An embrace. A speech about family. What she got was reality. "You cannot stay here tonight." I said. Her face went blank. "What?" "You need to go back to campus. Or to Denise's. But not here tonight." Her mouth opened in disbelief. "You're kicking me out?" "No." I said, "I am refusing to pretend this didn't happen." She started crying harder. But I did not take it back. Because some love is rescue. And some love is finally stopping the pattern that keeps teaching both people the wrong lesson. I need space, I said. And you need consequences that are real? She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I drove her to Denise's just after dark. The whole ride. She looked out the window. Streetlights moving over her face. Her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Once. Halfway there, she said. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I kept my eyes on the road. I think forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. She went quiet after that. At Denise's driveway, she gathered her bag and paused with the door half open. I did love you, she said. That was the saddest part of the whole story. I know, I answered. Then she got out. I drove home alone. Again. Funny how life circles. The same roads. Different wreckage. When I got back, I sat on the edge of my bed without turning on the light. The house was dark. The leftovers were in the fridge. The recorder sat on my dresser. Outside, a neighbor's inflatable turkey had collapsed sideways in the yard. Lit from within and ridiculous. I stared at it until I laughed for real this time. Small. Tired. Human. Over the next few months, the family narrative changed. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. Some people apologized directly. Some became overly nice in that guilty, uncomfortable way relatives do when they know they judged too fast. Some avoided me altogether because facing someone you misread so badly requires more character than many families produce. Wren called twice from campus. I let both go to voicemail before listening. The first was crying. The second was clearer. More accountable. No excuses. I texted back after the second one. Not much. Just this. I hope you get help. Real help. But it won't come from lying about who hurt you. That was the boundary. And for the first time in years, I kept one without explaining it to death. My mother sent a card at Christmas with no return address. Inside, it was a folded $100 bill and a note that said, I know money doesn't fix anything, but maybe it helps. I mailed it back. No note. Just the cash. That may have been the cleanest sentence I ever sent her. By spring, I started therapy too. Not because I doubted myself anymore. Because certainty after long confusion leaves its own bruises. My therapist said something in the third session that stayed with me. She said, parentified children are often punished twice, first by abandonment, then by being blamed for how they survived it. I wrote that down. Underlined it. Read it 3 times in the parking lot afterward. Because finally, someone had put language around the shape of my life without making me either saint or villain. Just human. And that changed me. Not all at once, but permanently. Wren and I do speak now. Sometimes. Carefully. Birthdays. Occasional holidays in public places. Neutral ground. No overnight stays. No private rewriting. No conversations where implication gets to replace fact. She is trying. I can say that honestly. Whether trying becomes trustworthy is a slower question. I no longer rush to answer slow questions for other people's comfort. That is one of the gifts truth gave me. A smaller life. Maybe. but a cleaner one. So, when people ask what happened that Thanksgiving, I tell them this. The truth came out. Not just about Wren. About all of us. About what abandonment does to children. About what sacrifice becomes when it goes unnamed too long. About how easily families prefer a dramatic lie over an inconvenient record. And about how dangerous it is to mistake the person who enforced survival for the person who caused the emergency. If this story stayed with you, like the video and subscribe. And if you have ever been blamed by the very person you protected, type "I stayed" in the comments. Because some of us were never the villain. We were just the only ones left when everything fell apart.